Whoo boy, we have a doozy here, folks. Ubisoft is crashing and burning right now, and honestly, I'm all for it. As an Assassin's Creed fan all the way since Altair ibn Ahad, I kept up with news regarding the company throughout the years as I eagerly awaited the next addition into the franchise. But that time has long since passed. Now, I sit back and watch alongside many others as Ubisoft's higher-ups are learning a hard lesson in humility, and it's well-deserved. If you aren't aware of all the craziness going on, don't worry, I got you. Recently, people like Legendary Drops and Mug Thief posted videos that delve deeper into Ubisoft's collapse as a company over the last decade and some change, due to nothing less than what can be described as a bad power trip. The company went from a place of creating innovative, refreshing mechanic formulas and characters that defined a blueprint for masterful storytelling and character development unlike we'd ever seen before, to a sad excuse for a company, left licking its self-inflicted wounds in a corner as it slaps away every band-aid offered to it. In a twist that everyone saw coming, Ubisoft's stock plummeted to the lowest it's ever been, at over 85% of a decline and literally worth $3 USD a share, currently. And the company has been panicking ever since. Although this has been snowballing for a while now, shareholders are both jumping ship and demanding that Ubisoft be gutted and rebuilt from the ground up. Critics are begging for Ubisoft to take heed, but as gamers, we couldn't care a fraction more. To us, Ubisoft died a long time ago. Because the truth of the matter is, when you proceed to tell the people buying your product over and over again, don't like it, don't buy it, and that they need to be comfortable not owning their games, that's all we need to hear to know that you don't care about us. When you refuse to accept that customers demand a certain standard from the games that they are paying for, and that formula is not the formula you've beaten to death, and when you continue to deny that there needs to be change on a fundamental level, instead claiming that it's the world that isn't ready, well, newsflash, people will stop supporting the sparkling shit you produce. And the saddest part is that we all know that the games that came from Ubisoft once upon a time, whether created or published, weren't always sparkling shit. Rayman, Splinter Cell, Prince of Persia, Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, etc. These names used to breathe excitement when thinking about playing these games and just how good they were. The memories created from these games defined a generation. Even now, at 25, I still find random moments in life to say Requiescat in Pace because those moments are burned in my brain forevermore from how Ezio used to make me feel and how much I wanted to learn Italian just because of how cool it sounded.
È così bello qui. This is where your order began?
It began thousands of years ago. But here it was reborn.
By the man you mentioned, Altair?
Altair ibn Ahad. He built us up and set us free. He saw the folly of keeping a castle like this. It had become a symbol of arrogance and a beacon for all our enemies.
And the mandate for menacing hoods? Was that his idea as well? You mentioned a creed before. What is it?
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted.
That is rather cynical.
It would be if it were doctrine, but it is merely an observation of the nature of reality. To say that nothing is true is to realize that the foundations of society are fragile, and that we must be the shepherds of our own civilization. To say that everything is permitted is to understand that we are the architects of our actions, and that we must live with their consequences, whether glorious or tragic.
Do you regret your decision to live as an assassin for so long?
I do not remember making that decision. This life, it chose me. No books. No wisdom. Just you, fratello mio. Requiescat in pace, Altair.
There will never be another feeling like that. At least not from Ubisoft. Because the keyword is used to. Because now, these new games are just shadows of their former glories. And although games like Rainbow Six Siege's modern successes should be an outlier that shows Ubisoft how great something can blossom when it's watered, nurtured, and maintained properly, instead, they choose to focus on what could just be spat out and milked for the quickest buck the most. But the thing I most want to share with you all is the recent news from Legendary Drops that was just too important to ignore. After the bumbling failure that was Star Wars Outlaws' sales, Ubisoft completely collapsed at seeing truly how tired the consumers were of them. Don't worry, by the way, if you didn't care to even think about Star Wars Outlaws because it had the Ubisoft name behind it, all you need to know is that it was an abysmally generic, formulaic, 90% stealth-based game using the Star Wars franchise. And it came out broken, buggy, and glitchy on purpose because Ubisoft admitted that the game wasn't up to releasing standards when it came out, and yet they still released it. People had pre-ordered this game and had to delete their save files from early access and restart because the game glitched out on its actual launch day and pre-orders couldn't continue without completely starting over. Absolutely horrible and absolutely unacceptable. Because of Outlaws, though, Ubisoft now has no choice but to take notice of how fed up everyone is. For a long while now, every mention of the company has been met with nothing but distaste and not an inch of concern for what they have next. And, I mean, think about it. What do you think of when you hear the name Ubisoft? The words that come to my mind are boring, predictable, stale, buggy, empty, formulaic, and possibly the most damning one, unapologetically microtransaction-y. And this is what I'm thinking of just as I'm thinking of reviews. Before, they wouldn't care about how we thought about them as a company. But with Assassin's Creed Shadows scheduled to release in November, and there being a dangerously low amount of positive noise for it, and their stock was rapidly declining to numbers they hadn't seen in over a decade and a half, they caved. Posting an announcement, they canceled their upcoming appearance to Tokyo Game Show, canceling showcases, playtests, and early game footage captures of ACS, and announced that AC Shadows would be delayed to next year in February 2025. An arguably even more baffling decision based on the games that are already scheduled to release then. They admitted that this delay is due to Outlaws, saying that Outlaws was poor quality and it wasn't up to standards, and they released it thinking that they could simply just patch it down the line. But had AC Shadows released in November, they admitted that it would have been the same quality as the Star Wars Outlaws that we got, in terms of it being buggy, glitchy, broken, and a entirely, fundamentally unfinished game that they would have thrown out and just patched down the line. And now that it's delayed, they realize that that was a bad idea. So now that it is canceled to be polished properly and is scheduled to release on Valentine's Day in 2025, they're also canceling early access and releasing the game on day one for everyone on Steam, although it will still require using their Uplay launcher. They claim that they see now just how badly they fucked up. But do they really? Despite the almost overwhelmingly negative reviews and perception from gamers both at home and overseas for AC Shadows, and the public outcry from Japanese consumers who were enraged at the misrepresentation of their culture seen throughout several points of the marketing for this game, from Chinese architecture in a Japanese setting, to stealing a flag from a historical reenactment group, to even advertising a figurine of Naoe and Yasuke on a broken torii gate, which is a sacred symbol of Japan. And it still somehow gets worse. Ubisoft continues to believe, behind the scenes of this all, that the outcry is just simply from whining toxic gamers who are just complaining to complain at the end of the day. Even in the apology that they posted to Japanese fans in July, it was clear that they had not yet learned their lesson, because all they said were excuses behind their actions, and their main excuse was that their stories are just creative liberties based on historical fiction. Yeah, sure, okay. You can surely set fictional events and characters in historic locations and time periods. They've been doing that this whole time. However, what cannot be done is erasing the true historical accuracy of a real person in order to create things that didn't happen and call it historical. We have seen Ubisoft play with ideas like this before, bringing Leonardo da Vinci into Ezio's world, having George Washington and Connors, and even featuring missions with Benjamin Franklin and Assassin's Creed Rogue, as mixed as that game's reviews were. But the difference here is, those characters weren't made into races or people that they were not, whether their role in the AC character's story was fictional or not. Nor were they the main selling point of the games. The AC main characters were always fictional, and so creative liberties were fine because the person being created didn't actually exist, and so neither did the events that happened in their lives. The problem lies in taking something that is factually one way, turning it completely another way, and claiming it's still the factual way, and just tweaked slightly. This isn't copying someone's homework and changing the words up. This is playing with a culture that treats their history with severe respect. Actually, let's do something together. Let's look at the past Assassin's Creed main characters from the previous games. Really quickly, I want to see something. Altair. Middle Eastern, set in a Middle Eastern setting. Ezio. Italian, set in Italy. Radon Hagedon, aka Connor. Native American, set in North America. Shay Patrick Cormac. Irish American, set in the North Atlantic. Edward Kenway. Welsh-British, set in the West Indies. Arnaud. French, set in France. Jacob and Evie Fry. British, set in London. Bayek and Aya. Egyptian, set in Africa. Alexis and Cassandra. Greek, set in Greece. Eivor. Scandinavian, set in Scandinavia and Europe. Naoe. Japanese, set in Japan. Yasuke. African, set in Japan. How does it sound to you? Regardless of how it feels, with the main controversy regarding the game addressed, we move on to what has been exposed of Ubisoft behind the scenes. Current and former Ubisoft developers and employees have bravely reached out to Legendary Drops to confirm all that we knew of the company was indeed true. And the confirmation is both relieving and aggravating. They range from revealing how higher-ups think of the company to how stifling and deprived of creativity the workplace is, to how extremely sensitive and toxic the positivity is, to the point of someone risking being fired over not using an emoji in an email, and the possibility of getting reported for harassment over an exclamation point. This overbearing censorship of expression for fear of offending anyone at the workplace and feeling the need to push these toxically positive agendas from the workplace environment into the games means that what we're seeing released is literally a reflection of the internal struggles of the company right now. The higher-ups truly believe that all we want in our games are these quote-unquote woke-driven narratives, lifeless characters that just tick all the representative boxes, same old mechanics and cosmetic microtransactions, and then boom, you have a masterpiece of a game? I'll let the clips of Legendary play through fully here, so you can get the full context of each employee's remark. First is the concern of if Ubisoft is even taking in the criticism they're receiving.
I couldn't imagine that it was possible for anyone to ignore this level of feedback, and Ubisoft has to be seeing it. So I spoke with a few developers from Ubisoft to shed some light on these issues. I started off by asking how Ubisoft internalizes and discusses general criticism from players and the rest of the industry, whether that's its repetitive design, agenda-driven content, or predictable games. They responded saying, at a high level, they rarely talk about it. At a project level, they brush it off as toxic gamer talk. As Asmongold correctly pointed out in a video of his, Ubisoft is filled with toxic positivity that prevents any growth. I then asked, what about the Japanese community's backlash over Assassin's Creed Shadows? It's obvious that they haven't done their research, and even the smallest details are going to be noticed by a culture that's as proud as the Japanese. They responded by saying that the criticisms haven't been talked about, and they've only issued demands that we mustn't engage with discussion on that topic publicly. Meaning everything that we've said up until this point, all the criticism that we've had over the years for Ubisoft games, even that of the industry itself, has fallen on deaf ears. I don't know if it's sad or if it's somewhat, it's somewhat cathartic to have that validated. I mean, it's the main complaint that the vast majority of gamers have had over the years, which is that these companies aren't listening to us. And in this case, I have developers that are telling me, yeah, they're not listening to you. One, because they don't want to take criticism, and two, because they don't know how to differentiate bad from good criticism.
Second is the discussion around diversity in the workplace, or, unfortunately, the lack thereof when it comes to creativity.
I took the time to talk to the Ubisoft developers about workplace culture, about the initiative that they've taken for diversity hiring, and what happens behind the scenes at Ubisoft, and it's wild to see how accurate some of the assumptions that have been made by myself and others. Now, continuing my conversation with one of the developers, I wanted to find more about the workplace structure and management, and seeing as though the company has had initiatives that have been put in place to make the workplace a little bit more diverse, I asked, what benefits have you seen? Is there more diversity in thought, or is it creating a more one-sided environment? They said that so far the initiative hasn't had any impact on the team that I'm a part of. However, it's clear that some topics are taboo. What happened is now that people end up in a meeting with HR for trivial stuff, not adding smiley faces to a message or adding an exclamation point at the end of a message because some people are reporting it for harassment. One of the things that wasn't in your video is that Ubisoft had some controversy during the Me Too period, letting go of a manager in high positions, and some left on their own because they knew they'd be discovered. I then asked, what was the impact of this in the workplace? They responded by saying the editorial direction and overall mindset shifted from the boys club to safe content. Reaching for plain characters like Kay and Star Wars is a perfect example of this. The idea to have beautiful characters such as Baldur's Gate or Uncharted is met with distrust. The developer shared sentiments saying that safe content also leads to limited opportunities on the gameplay side. Even for Star Wars, we had to work with Disney, which would have shut down most attempts at depicting a true criminal underworld with cruelty and drama. When you put this developer's perspective in line with the recent failures and controversies at Ubisoft or any AAA developer at this point, it all makes sense. An overcorrection in sensitivity brought on by the boys club days that many studios experienced during their early years. As such, many games today lack the teeth and grit that players crave because those things are seen as problematic or unsafe to make in the workplace. Don't use emojis or exclamation points. You could offend someone. Holy shit.
Third, and this one is a whole other can of worms, has to do with a leaked tone-deaf memo from Ubisoft's CEO that the employees received. In this memo, he clings to critic scores of Star Wars Outlaws over the criticism of their game, claims that Black Friday sales will be their saving grace from all of its profit loss, and genuinely refuses to admit to fault for where the company currently stands. Regarding this memo, Legendary spoke to another employee.
Interested in the perspective of the employees who received this memo, I had a few questions on their thoughts of the messaging and the leadership of the company. I asked, what has been the message from management to the staff about Ubisoft's declining sales? What do they believe is the reason behind it? They responded, the fun fact is they don't talk much about it. They mainly focus on the fact that they reach their financial objectives, which are mainly achieved through casual player sales, not the vocal gamer minority that are sick of what you described in your video. Also, something to know is that through the years, the number of management floors has increased to ridiculous amounts, so communication is often blurry unless they come directly from HQ, and even then, it's almost entirely corpo bullshit that isn't useful in the end. I asked another employee to verify the increase in management at the company, fearing that this is likely one of the biggest issues that's facing the company, seeing that lack of clear and creative vision. They painted a picture of a company that's not only overrun with management, but that's passively aggressive about removing higher paid and talented employees while slotting in underskilled and unexperienced management at a cheaper rate. They claim that Ubisoft as an employer shows little regard for their developers. What happens in practice is that they essentially push out senior engineers, promoting junior engineers to senior roles after just a few years of experience, oftentimes with experience in just one engine. Meanwhile, experienced developers with far broader skill sets are being overlooked. This constant cycle of turnover with inexperienced leaders leads to noticeable drops in quality, with bugs appearing in their games. The passionate, dedicated developers leave, while those who are just going through the motions stay behind. This doesn't just affect the technical quality of their games, but also impacts the design and creativity. For instance, you'll find designers working on FPS mechanics who have never played an FPS game before, or engineers who don't understand how the mechanics they're building are supposed to feel. There's a lack of passion and skill across the board, and the results are obvious.
It's honestly baffling just how big their ego has become, while at the same time being not in the least bit surprising. My heart does go out to those brave employees who did reach out. They must be extremely exhausted. These employees are suffering behind the scenes. They most likely became developers due to their love of story crafting and creating great games, but now they're forced to make these shit games and watch them be shit from the beginning and go to shit in the end, time and time again, having no choice but to bend to the wills of these money-grubbing tycoons' tone-deaf demands, or risk being fired from the company. Executives are refusing to listen to reason and blaming everyone else for their failures until they had no choice but to be slapped in the face with the threat of usurpation of power and a loss of all of their money by shareholders.
Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy. But the first time somebody told me that, I don't know, I thought they were bullshitting me, so boom, I shot them. The thing is, okay, he was right.
And the funny thing is, now Ubisoft admits that this delay is even more risky, as it also delays their roadmap for the future Assassin's Creed releases. Like that matters right now. I won't tell you what to do with your money, but I will say that I'm almost completely sure that no one feels bad for Ubisoft at this point. Their scrambles at trying to crawl back to the customers now is only reflective of their constant ignoring of our wants and outcries previously until we took our wallets out of the picture. It's insane how companies truly forget that without a product that delivers value and quality for its price, you won't have a consumer. And without a consumer, you don't have a business to stand on. With all things considered, we can absolutely say this is a win for the consumer base. Ubisoft's collapse and burn is a hard reality check to them and to other companies who were thinking of following their predictable model that people will not be fooled forever. And in this economy of increasingly expensive games, People will not put up with anything less than the amazing experiences they've had in previous games. Just as such, Ubisoft doubling back on their previous plans of releasing AC Shadows how they were going to then releasing how they plan to in February, shows that they actually do see what has been working in the industry. They saw the data of what games were doing well and what were the successes in their formulas. They knew what the consumer did and didn't want. They'd just been ignoring it this whole time, thinking they were above it all and that we'd pay them regardless. So, how's it feel to be falling from your pedestal, Ubisoft? I do want to hear the public's opinion on this. So, what about you? How do you feel about Yasuke? Do you care about historical accuracy in a historical fiction game? Do you not care about changes in race, ethnicity, nationality, or culture as long as the story is great? Or do you demand cultural, gender, or sexual representation as the standard for these modern age games, regardless of the contents? And I mostly want to hear the Japanese consumer base. Are you outraged? Are you angry? Voice your concerns. Voice your rage. You are valid to want your history and your culture to be represented properly in a game that's claiming to represent historical accuracy, even if it takes creative liberty. You're valid, and we're here to listen. In the end, we'll all just have to watch the clock tick down to the new year and see just what happens to ACS and if Ubisoft even makes it that far now. Thank you for watching. Talk to me in the comments below, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!